Cool. Hello, mate. How are we doing?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. Getting used to this online interaction, certainly with you as well. Yeah, long day, but I'm good. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you too, buddy. What time is it where you are?
It's a great question. 8:30
Okay,
night.
not too bad. Not too bad. Not bad as when we were doing the level one.
No, and you guys are 11 hours behind, I think.
Yeah, so it's
So
9:30 here.
nice,
So
getting ready for the day.
yeah, definitely. First, thank you so much for coming on board. I'm so excited for this. I loved working with you on the FIH level one the other week, and I think you named it in terms of us being like kindred spirits and how we got on and stuff. So I am stoked to have you here. Um, so for those that don't know, who are you? What have you done? What are you doing now?
Yeah, you did prep me with this, and it's the worst question to ask. I think the way I'll answer it, and you'll probably want more, but I I'm a country boy. I was brought up in a dairy farm in a little place called Ferguson Valley in 2 hours south of Perth, Western Australia. So obviously I'm an Australian, currently in New Zealand, a bit of a gypsy, but that's sort of my upbringing. So that was my childhood, which included lots of sport and so forth. A great childhood, and I guess since then, if you talk about the hockey stuff, I've had roles over the last probably 20 years. I'm getting old, so timelines get a bit blurry. But I've been a development officer, worked in a number of countries, England, New Zealand, Australia. I've been an institute coach across Australia and a number of states. I was a technical director for Auckland Hockey, been a high performance manager for Hockey WA. Um, Worked in a couple of national programs, including assistant coach of the Hockey Roos. And so, yeah, I've got a pretty diverse background in and lots of great opportunities and experiences that I've had in hockey. So feel pretty full, I suppose. I'm not that old, even though I feel old, I suppose, in terms of all the things that I've been lucky enough to be involved in. I often say that I've been fortunate enough to have almost two lifetimes of coaching wrapped up already, which is sort of great because so many stories and so many great experiences that I've been lucky enough to have. And it's still a sprightly young but feeling old age.
Mate, you're definitely not old, but some serious experience there. Like, how did you get into coaching then? Because obviously, with all of that stuff which you said that you've kind of done and been through, like, how did you get into it?
Yeah, it's interesting. When I was a kid, so my father was a coach in AFL, so Australian Football League, and he coached all of our sporting teams. I have three younger brothers, so that's that goes with the territory when you've got four boys, I suppose. But he was a bit of a local legend as a footballer and then as a coach, and we used to just follow him around everywhere. We'd be at training, we'd be in the change rooms at halftime of games, we'd be at the pub on Sunday night. So we're sort of immersed in that world, watching him be a leader, I suppose, with us and our friends in teams, but also just in the community. And it wasn't just like a football coaching thing or other sports. He was a real leader in that sort of regional community area, like a really loved guy that did a lot of stuff for people. We'd often have people just living at our house when we were boys, people that he'd found on the streets, tried to get jobs for. It was connected to football. They could play football, but he would often just have people in our house that he was trying to sort out and help them get their lives back on track and so forth. So that was my upbringing with him. He's a pretty special guy. And then, as I sort of went through my playing career in different sports, and then sort of hockey became the thing that I was most focused on. I remember I was playing for a club called Alder Quinians. I was only 15 at the time, and I was in the one squad, which I think was a bit of a I was about one of the only juniors, so they were just being nice to me and trying to have some kids around. But every now and then, I'd play ones most weekends as well as twos, and I'd warm up the keeper, and then if we were winning, I'd play 5 minutes at the end and stuff. But I was playing with guys like Jay Stacey and Nigel Patmore and these sort of guys. And Nigel Patmore is a great Australian player. He was the coach. He's a really hard, great coach, great guy, but hard as nails. But I remember the point of the story, I used to go home and I'd write the drills that we would do and the things that Nigel had talked about. And I guess I thought at the time that I was doing it because I wanted to become a better player. But I think if I look at my upbringing and who my father was and the sort of life that we lived, and then I think about the things I was doing when I was playing, I think I was almost sort of was just in the perfect space where I was born and bred to sort of get into coaching, if you like. But I didn't really do much coaching early on. I coached my brother's team when I was a teenager, like his primary school team, and I ended up in Darwin trying to play AHL for the Territory Stingers. Darwin, if the people don't know, it's like or the Northern Territories, I think it was at the time, this will be an old stat, but it's like 0.02% of the hockey population in Australia, and yet they compete on the national stage as one of the 8 state and territories. So a big ask for that area, but a great place for opportunity if you want to, you want to get a game and you want to get exposed to it. And I ended up coaching the club under 16 team there. I just was basically told to do it, I think. I hadn't really done any coaching. And I had got some names: Joel Carroll, ex-Kookaburra; Desmond Abbott, very special ex-Kookaburra, and a range of boys as well that ended up playing national juniors for Australia. So it was a really special group. And so we had a lot of fun just mucking around and doing all sorts of crazy things. And from that, I became the development officer, and I ended up coaching the NT under-18 team. And we actually won the national championship, which is unheard of at the time. And just based on these guys, really special talents, just in one cluster together at the time. And that was back page, front page news, big deal, and that was all really exciting. And then pretty quickly, the institute coach at the time left, and it was seen that I think might have been 1 or 2, but they were worried that people were coming to Darwin to do that job as part of the National Training Centre system as a stepping stone to get a bigger state job. Mm-hmm. And somehow I got in the conversation that they wanted a local, and it was me. So I got interviewed, and very quickly, in a short pace of a few years, I was Institute of Sport head coach, and really no idea what I was doing, really raw, had a feel for something maybe, I don't know. And then I was sort of put through this great mentorship by guys like Mark Hager and David Bell and a whole range of people who I'd go on tours with Australian A teams, and they just pretty much put their arm around me and taught me their trade and what they believed in. And it's just on this amazing journey of learning how to coach. And yeah, that's sort of how, my life led to it, but that's how quickly it went professional coach.
That's mad. And it's funny, like, we talk about players being in the right environment and the right opportunity for them to become great players. It sounds like you had the perfect opportunity to grow with, like I say, with your father, with the way you kind of took on the information. It sounds like you were just meant to be a coach, and that was that basically. And that's what you were kind of born to do more than anything else.
I certainly had the upbringing for it. I had all the learnings and the things in front of me to process and so forth. And yeah, but there's no doubt, timing and fortune and luck, getting that team with all of these future, Hall of Fame type kids from that area, and really not knowing what I was doing. And then because they were good and they were saying it was great, I get this other job and I'm a development, and we win, and probably would have won anyway. I felt like I did a good job, but who knows? And all of a sudden someone leaves and you have a career, or an opportunity to have a career, I guess. So if people say that luck is not involved in the sliding doors of our lives, I think miss things. There's no doubt you've got to be prepared for opportunities, because if I didn't have that upbringing and have sort of a feel about what I believed in and what I saw, I probably wouldn't have been able to be competent enough to at least wing it for a while until I sort of but yeah, I was very fortunate, mate. Very fortunate.
Sounds really similar to a little bit like the story with Andrew Wilson, who's the Spanish assistant coach. He kind of chucked himself in, and he said it's kind of luck, but at the same time, you got to put the grind and you got to give yourself the opportunity to have that luck. And I think that makes a big difference. So going on. The reason I wanted to talk to you, and we kind of touched on this, but we never really got into it when we were chatting with the course, and it kind of stuck with me, and I was like, I need to talk to you about this. And you were talking about kind of match day and impact coaches can have and kind of that side of things. So I kind of wanted to open up with that and kind of what would you say the biggest impact a coach can have on match day, and then we'll kind of dig deeper and we'll see where this rabbit hole is going to go. But I kind of wanted to start with that.
There's a few, I think, and probably what I'll start with is through that background when I first started coaching, it was a lot of inspirational speeches and intensity and yelling and trying to old school take people with me and be strong and all those sort of things. And I must have been okay at it and made it a bit of an art. That was sort of me as an early coach, inspirational speeches and selling a vision and getting buy-in and sort of being good at that stuff. But as the pressure and the ambition grows, when all of a sudden you realise the pot of gold that maybe you've been handed to, and ego and all the stuff that comes in with, losing your way with how you got there and what it's actually all about. I was still that, but I remember smashing walkie-talkies and breaking whiteboards and bits and pieces like that, and still being successful. I had an unbelievable run in the early parts of my coaching, probably just with the right team, who knows. But yeah, I got to a point with that where that I had to sort of reflect on that. And I think then, as I said, I've been lucky enough to have 2 lifetimes of coaching. Lots, I've coached in the AHL and the New Zealand NHL over 12 times. And I said the other day, I think I've coached like over 50 junior national titles, which it might not quite be that. But some years I was coaching 2 or 3 teams because of the natures of the jobs I had and the places I was at. So, what that does is it builds a lot of opportunities to fail and to reflect and so forth. So that was my starting point, and which worked. And then as you go along the journey, you learn more about, how people learn, how to build cultures, how important it is in terms of having teams that are adaptable and resilient and that can problem solve, and all the different bits and pieces that designing an environment allows them to be able to do in the moment and take ownership for. And then also you look at all this, you're in the system for so long, and you see kids stop playing after they think they can't play for their country, or when they get to a certain age when it gets too hard. And so the retention stuff, and then you start going out a journey with your own mental health, and so you're looking at all these different things which are about a bigger picture around what sport's about. And then with all that success and failure and research and access to people like yourself, you start to sort of get a feel for the fact that you can have your cake and eat it. Like, you can be successful, but you don't have to have this short-termism sort of blood and guts approach, the fear approach and so forth. There is a better way. And maybe you can't get there until you've had all that, because we want to be successful. And, when you're trying to control everything really tightly and you are controlling as much as you can, it does work to a degree sometimes, but it's not sustainable and it's not healthy. So through all of that, mate, I'm not sure I'm piecing that together well for you. And there's lots of bits and pieces in between about research and stuff that I was involved in and so forth, because that keeps forming you, right, your views and your knowledge. But the place I'm at to now, which I think I'm pretty confident on in terms of however long I keep coaching, is that I go into game day and I call it play acting. So I've got to a point where I have no emotional connection to what's happening in the game. And I'm pretty good at it, to the point where sometimes I need to go, like, you're actually part of this, you need to get something, get a bit of fizz in you, because I'm too. But I call it play acting because I think when you emotionally ride every bump and every play, you start talking about neurobiology and what's happening in your brain chemically, all the different things. You can't have a lens that allows you to be composed or to see things clearly. And so you're gonna either make poor decisions or you're gonna behave poorly. Like, I think it's just a given if you're in that space. I think it's really hard to manage, even if you're really strong with your discipline and you're not that type of person. Like, it's just glitches, or you're not coaching as well as you can, or seeing the things that you need to see. So I go into games with no emotional investment or thought about the outcome. Now, I still like winning, and I have a responsibility to try and help the team I'm coaching do that. But My feeling is when I have that position of being outside of that, that I can then be really attuned to what the group needs and what I need to look at and how I need to behave. And sometimes that might be that I'm really demanding and I'm up and about and got energy and I'm coaching in a different way because we're flat or for whatever reason. But it can also mean that I just need to stay out of their way. And, I tell this story about, I think it was the first round before lockdown came down where I was in the umpires thing. They weren't that happy about it, but in the end they thought it was funny and they let me get away with it. But just eating sushi. We design, our players know what we're doing. We're playing okay. Quarter time, we're just talking about don't get frustrated. The intent's good. We're trying to make it work. Just keep persevering. And then I just go back and stay out of their way. And if they ask for feedback, I'm there and we're talking. But I think the emotional connection is a real problem for how coaches carry themselves, a real problem. And then I think this feeling that you have to be contributing and the group's relying on you is a real problem. So if you design your program properly and you're developing athletes that are empowered and really clear on how we want to play and how we want to deal with certain things, and that's always a moving feast, right? But if you design your program like that, then and they know how you operate, you've got to trust them to do that, and you've got to allow them the experience to do it as well, instead of intervening all the time and telling them. And it's even the feedback piece. Coaches that think they have to tell someone something every time they come on and off the bench, and we train athletes to want that. Come and talk to me. You need feedback, and it's like, is it going to have a difference really? Is it just going to add stress or confusion? And do we have any value by giving? And it's not that we shouldn't give feedback or support them, or when they go to a back three, am I sinking in there? Yep, that's clear, mate. That sort of stuff. But I think this just want to have an impact, I think, is a real problem. So my belief is coaches do have a massive impact on game day, mainly in terms of how they carry themselves, because that ripples through the group. It has a massive effect on how the group feels, like a massive effect. But then the other one is knowing when you need to be intervening or supporting or interacting, because I don't think it's as much as is required or what we think it is. We certainly don't need to go into the game being emotionally connected, and we certainly don't need to go into the game thinking that they need us every second of the day and we constantly have to be having input.
I think that whole piece around getting the culture right and having that consistency is something which I really believe in and have got wrong. I'm not going to sit here and say I've been perfect and I've got it right. I'm human and I've definitely messed it up a few times. But for me, having reflected over this time in lockdown, I think it's, like you say, that connection with the way I am in training has to then align with the way I am on game day, and even down to expectation of language. So if we're saying we want to create a creative, free, experimental style of play, and then you get to game day and you're all like, regiment, like, you've got to be in line, they try and do something and you go at them, or that's not good enough or whatever, then actually there's a huge disconnect there. And then you have that inconsistency because expectations aren't meeting reality. So like you're saying, if you get it right and you have that consistency between the way you are in training and the way you are in game day, then that's your culture started already. Like, you're already in good shape.
Yeah. And also just, you've got to design your training week with consistency and not just put out fires every week, but it's like, this is what we're learning and this is the evolution, or this is how we're going to progress with that, and hold your nerve with a longer term sort of, not organic, but a journey that is sort of just building on itself, so that they're empowered. They know how we play, what they do in certain situations. They know that, as I said to you in the thing, they're Navy SEALs, they're not Rangers, and you're here for them, and you may intervene and you may just trust them or whatever, but that's the culture. And then when you set that and they understand it, you get such amazing stuff out of players that they're capable of, and the growth and how they flourish when they go, okay, we're trusted, and we know what we're trying to do together, and we all know we're on this page, or at least this story that we're writing together, they just get on with it. Isn't that the point of the whole thing with coaching? That you're trying to do stuff so they can just go and play?
Yeah, I think people forget that, and I think the whole point of us as a coach, and I think we share this view, is we're enablers, we're supporters in somebody else's journey. Like, yes, we have our own journey which we're going on, but when we're on a pitch and we're with that group of people, it's how can we support them to love and grow as human beings, and then the hockey will come as well. But it's social first more than anything else.
Yeah, the social one's interesting. One of the things just comes to mind that I'm coaching the Somerville Premier League women in Auckland, which is a really sort of historic, proud old club, really great club. And I sort of came in and back into New Zealand around January, February, and I know a lot of this group because I've coached them in the NHL about 7-8 years ago. So there's a bit of a connection beforehand, but a lot of us knew, and that environment's new, and they're really social and casual before training and games, and we were sort of taking half those, it was mainly training at this point, just to get going and to be just switched on with what we're trying to do. And I didn't push it because I sort of like to just take your time and see how things pan out with this. I'm not this is what I believe in, this is my style coach. I think you've got to figure out your group and figure out how to harness who they are. And I certainly said to them, we need to be better, and maybe we're too casual. We're having that conversation, but I sort of, after reading different bits and pieces and being involved with different things, it sort of twigged on me that this is actually the strength of this group, and it's why it's so special, because of that social connection. And this time and what they're doing is it's essentially the core of who they are, and it's really important. And so to try and take that away from them with some sort of sterile, disciplined approach of get here, do this so that we can start a bit more switched on, was just not going to, it was going to kill the soul of the team in a way, I think, and it certainly wouldn't have worked in terms of my relationship with them. And we've sort of chopped and changed. It's been a bit hard because we started and then had lockdown, and then we started again, and we tried to, so we haven't had a consistent, this is how we train to a degree. But one of the things we started doing, and is certainly on our radar as part of our way of sorting that out, is that when we get there, we start with a game, and we play either a half-court game or whatever it is, and we have consequences for it. It could be running, could be push-ups. Earlier in the year, they bought these horrible orange headbands, and the group that lost the game, they wore them for the rest of the training, So there's just, and then what happens is it's a bit of fun and it's a competition, and that brings out all of those things for them. Get there, and they're social and they're connecting, and they're building this relationship and this cohesion and synergy as a group, and then they start because there's something up for grabs. And then we go and train, and we don't lose half an hour every session.
That's really cool. I like the idea with the horrible orange headbands. I'll see if I can dig something out for this season for the lads.
What's interesting, that only lasted a few weeks. We sort of did that for about a month just before lockdown, but they kept going missing, and they blamed me for being unorganised and so forth. But I think they were hiding them.
Just on the way out, just chuck it in the bin.
We don't have enough headbands for today. Sorry, guys. And they're like, yeah, we know, because we're taking
them. So do you vary your approach when you're kind of building up to a game and the way you are between kind of league tournament, where it's like once a week or maybe 2 games a weekend or whatever, to like your tournament stuff? Do you vary how you are with, like, on game day? Obviously, the way you are kind of around, you'll have different meeting times and everything else, so obviously that will be different. But do you vary, like, actually kind of the way you're at half-time, your pre-match, like, how does that then look between league and tournaments?
Yeah, as you say, there's obvious constraints around tournaments where you've got back-to-back games, so you've got time constraints and you've got things you have to do. So in many ways, your processes, they're hard to get around because there's things you've got to do you've got to have some sort of game preparation, whatever that looks like, and including, how we're going to play, who's lining up, that information. I don't like the word game brief, but the elements of what a game brief normally is for people. And then you've sort of got the review process, whatever. Again, that can take lots of different forms, but you've got those two things, and the prepping, and then the game, and then the cool down recovery. And so there's bits that you sort of can't get around, and it happens really quickly when you've got games on top of each other. And then you've also got to fit in rest when you're having to get a rest day. So I think it's hard in a tournament. I think you sort of you'll have your style and the way you think things should be done, but the constraints of the timelines means that it's pretty much set for you to a degree. It's just how you do those different things, because you just got to fit them in. In terms of the sort of week-to-week competition stuff, I really like to just design our week and our year in a way where we're training in a manner that keeps updating and clarifying and building on how we want to play. So there's no sort of reaching out here or not. Every now and then there might be a thing, like tonight we did live corners, for example, for an hour, and mixed different rotations and stuff, just because we've been time pressured to get ready for this restart to the season. But those things for me are hopefully pretty rare. Like I just want to have a long-term plan that we're constantly updating and building on and adapting with in terms of how we train from week to week. So that stuff doesn't change. Like we're not running a session to prepare for this group or so forth. And then with the game prep type information, I'm really unsure, and I've had this sort of torment for years around sitting in change rooms a half an hour before games, putting stuff up on a whiteboard. The usual is a lineup and 3 points and maybe some X's with a press or something. And I remember, maybe I was a bad athlete, but I remember sitting in those rooms thinking, this is just killing my mojo in this sterile change room with this bad lighting. I'm not listening to a word the coach is saying because it's just white noise and we've heard it all before. It's not engaging me. And so I struggle to see the value in that. I think it's just like a time-old tradition almost in a lot of ways. I'm sure there are ways that you can do it where it's more engaging, but I'm not convinced it's the best use of your time an hour before the game if you think about how you want to mentally and physically and even spiritually sort of prepare yourself and with each other for that game. So I like to send that stuff out in, whether it's a WhatsApp group or conversations towards the back end of the week and part of the week-long conversation, and sort of bypass that moment in time change room thing. And I've experimented with different things and not all of it's worked. So I probably haven't hit the sweet spot that I'm comfortable with, and maybe it'll be group to group. I just think there's things that we do with the traditional game brief that just really don't hold any purpose and potentially are detrimental, even if it's minimal.
Yeah. So what do you do now? What does your league's actually starting this weekend?
Yeah.
So what will your kind of timings or prep look like before the first whistle?
So we train tonight. We train twice a week. Train tonight. We had a quick, as I said, we had a live corner session, which is a bit different than what we'd normally do, but it's something we're playing a bit of catch up. And we had a quick chat mainly about selection and the stress of having so many athletes playing well and doing everything they're asked to do, but they can't all play. So we just keep reiterating that we've been talking about this for a long time, but now it's becoming real, right? So it was a really quick conversation. The girls, our leadership group, organised a bit of a social thing, so they went out and just caught up. So there's that sort of, I guess it's almost like a ceremony, which I think is quite cool. Our normal weekly processes at the moment are that I will send out the team at 9 o'clock in the morning on WhatsApp. So it's like a PowerPoint, one page PowerPoint slide, and then that tomorrow night or in the afternoon, so they've got some time to chew on it, we'll send out the game brief. Which is pretty basic, but there's just information so they can coordinate themselves. They know where they're playing, what the rotations look like, and then at the moment, and I'm not this is probably just because of the time, because we're trying to build understanding of our game plan with 8 new players back in and restart and so forth. And we've changed some things because our playing group, it's a different group to harness, right? So we don't have to and can't probably play the way we were practicing early in the year. So what we're doing is we've got a game plan, which is based sort of a model based on the principle stuff that you teach in the FAH course. So that sort of model where we've got some basic principles we work under, and then we've got some details underneath that. And what we're doing at the moment is based on our sort of probably what we need to highlight which bit's the priority first up. We're highlighting a couple of those things each weekend, and I'm pretty much just doing a Q&A with them in the change rooms before we go and warm up. And only in the change rooms because I don't have a better space at the moment. It kills my soul a bit to have to do that. But yeah, having this Q&A where I say, when we say get it to the eyes, Jazz, what does that mean? And then we sort of work as a group to have this sort of workshop on getting clarity. Or like, yeah, okay. And then what comes from that? Why do we do it? And it's just reiterating and clarifying those two parts of our game plan. And the idea is we keep building that over the next month. Then we're just refreshing and clarifying the whole thing. And then we can start probably zeroing in on things that maybe aren't where they need to be and having more of a focused intent, I suppose.
So would your dream be then to almost turn up 10 minutes before warm-up, little chat, warm-up, play? Is that kind of maybe a bit more social time before? But in terms of if you've done your processes right, the time before the game is minimal?
Yeah. Like the other thing I struggle with is, because part of this is the stress footprint, and we're talking about amateur to a degree. We're talking about some serious hockey players, but they're not getting paid for it. So they have lives and jobs and families and all these things. And I think we're just really inefficient with our time. And I think, and this is a bit of a challenge point where, we might the tradition might be to get to the game an hour beforehand. And you go in the change room for half an hour, and then you've got half an hour to warm up. You do 15 minutes of this, 15 minutes of this, whatever. And, when you have one weekend and life's hard, which it is for everyone, it's all relative, right? I think it's an hour, and not all of it. You obviously got to get to the ground at some point before you play. Unless you want to be there to watch or you enjoy it, and I'm sure some do, but I think that's like a half an hour out of their lives that's not necessary because we're being inefficient with what we're doing and we're just following what we've always done. So my utopia, and of course this is the reasons it's a challenge is not because I don't believe in it, it's because some people, we're creatures of habit, right? So this is a tough fight with some people because they sort of listen to you and they go, yeah, 100% Butch, I agree with it, I like that. And then they feel uncomfortable about getting to the ground later because it's so different and new to them. But my utopia would be that you turn up and start warming up, but you're warming up in a way, and maybe the warm up is before physical, where it is that social cohesion. Because I think if you move into how do we prep for a game, well, if we know what we're doing and we know what everyone's roles are, how it's going to play out before we get there, we don't need to go through that because then our processes aren't right and we don't trust each other. Like we're just rehashing stuff to feel good about it, and all it's doing is killing our minds for half an hour. So then you go, okay, what's the point of a warm-up? And you think of what does a warm-up normally look like when you go down to hockey, and you've got these regimented sort of military, dynamic warm-ups, and they're long and we're really thorough with them and so forth. And then probably warm up on the stick and ball as long as we can. And I think if you looked at the standard warm-ups on the balls now, you'd probably have like a hit up for a while. Then maybe there's some small games. You might have the back group just passing around the 25 while they're doing some goal shooting or penalty corners. So there's sort of standard bits that get plugged in around getting ready to go. So we talk about the physical warm-up first. You've got to think that you've got 16 players on that day, and they're all individuals and they all need different things. So I would struggle to believe that sort of regimented approach is going to suit everybody. Some people are crazy meticulous. Some people just want to sit down and just breathe. They don't actually like warming up because they feel like they're wasting energy, or they just want to, have some quiet time. Now the challenge is how do you get those 16 individual forms of life and what they really need. You've got to figure out with them what they really need, not just I'm lazy, but what do you really need to be prepared? And then you've got to find a way to harness that into the group. And that's just not physical and technical. It's social, it's spiritual, it's mental. It's like a whole. And I think with this reductionist approach of physical and technical, I think we're missing the point.
Yeah. So just had a question come up from John Williams, actually. So we'll get into that in a sec. But for me, we've had a long chat about what does game day look like for us, and we've got some guys which are like, I want the structure, I want that kind of, I know I'm going to turn up, I'm going to go in my line, I'm going to follow the guy in front, and like that's what they want. And there are some guys who are like, I don't want to warm up, I literally want to turn up, little stretch, bit of a knock around, and let's play. Like, or they like the stick and ball stuff before game, but actually the thought of following the guy in front. So we're actually going to play around with you guys. You've got 10-12 minutes for physical warm up. Do it on. If a few of you want to go and go in lines and keep it really, really regimented, fine. If a couple of you guys want to just do your own thing and go off and do whatever, that's also fine, because we'll come together at some point.
And I think if everyone's happy and everyone understands why and what you're doing, because the risk is that some people get annoyed because they think people aren't switched on and they need them. But I think if you get buy-in and you sell that vision and they understand what you're doing, like it's not going to have an impact. The only impact it's going to have if people get annoyed with it. But if everyone understands why you're doing it and they're free to do what they need to do, the only other challenge is making sure that you're getting that cohesion. So that's social connection, because that's a really important thing that some of the physical warm-ups actually do, because the smart ones are doing dynamic stuff and high-fiving and they're interacting, and there is a bit of, they're building that, the smart versions of that. But it doesn't necessarily cater for individuals in a way that fits them really well sometimes.
Yeah, and
they're forced to be a part of it and do it.
Yeah, because I've been in teams and had teams a part of it where they've not wanted music. I love music. It's, part of my soul. I want music on 24/7 if I could. But other people are like, no. Like, I need quiet. I need my own space. Like, can't, don't want people like jumping around and being all excitable and things like that. So I think also what we're also thinking is this is going to give them that little bit of space where if they want to have their quiet time and chill, they don't want to come out the change room straight away. They want a minute or two just to like decompress and then head out. You can have your time. So we're gonna be a bit more experimental with what we're doing for sure.
I like that word. And in the end, if you sell it and you get buy-in and they're part of that experiment, if you like, then there will have to be compromises because you're a team. So free for all. You still need to come together. You still need to work together. And it'll never be. It's not. You couldn't say, well, what's the solution? Because there isn't. There's one. There's maybe one for every team. But it's like, it's the art of how do you get to that place together and make it work somehow.
Yeah. So John's question, let me just bring that up here. He's got two questions. So first one is, what do you mean exactly by game brief? So we'll do that one first, then we'll come on to the second one, which I think is quite interesting.
Yeah. I was actually having a chat with one of the Black Sticks girls tonight at training, and I used some term, can't remember what it was, and I often get caught because I'm as I said, I've been a bit of a gypsy, worked all over the place and moved around, and that's part of all the great experiences. But the problem is I've formed my own language, which is a sort of hybrid merged version of a number of different international programs and countries and probably my own things that I've made up. So, yeah, sometimes I've got to check myself that I assume that everyone knows what the hell I'm talking about sometimes. So game brief is sort of the game preparation meeting, the one, whether it's a PowerPoint and you're showing the lineup and maybe some focus points, what your rotations or subs might be. It sometimes has attacking penalty corner hierarchies and what corner variations you're going to use. It's sort of like the game planning logistics info so that everyone knows who's doing what and how it's all going to be pieced together, which then sometimes ties into, you get a quote at the last page. That's always useful, stuff like that. So bits and pieces like that. So it's the game preparation, planning, logistic meeting that traditionally happens right before a game. Yeah. That would be my game brief.
It's kind of the detail, isn't it, that underpins the style and like how you're going to pick up on certain areas or highlight points, really. So, and then the second question, and I'll bring this up. If a player is already aware they're not starting, wouldn't that be demotivating, and maybe the warming up is then taken to be more relaxed? I'm going to let you start. This is something I've done for a couple of years now in terms of messaging on the Friday night before the game, so then they can sleep on it and go into it the next day. But yeah, keen to hear kind of your thoughts on putting lineup out early.
It's a great question without the sort of context of how that plays out, because those are little traps, right? So there's a couple of things out. The first one is sometimes starting lineups are your best team because of how rotations work and trying to fit the most minutes or the balanced minutes into your group. But generally for me, they're not. They're about balance. You look at a lot of stats that I looked at with teams that I've had in the past, or just planning stuff before you take over a team. It's the middle parts of quarters where you get exposed, which means that your rotation plan basically has your 5 weaker players all on together. And so then often you also don't have penalty corner, people or capacity. So I try and mix it up. It's probably not a major issue with the current group I'm coaching, but I don't see starting lineup as that's our best 11. And then that's about culture and understanding, and it'll still, for some, might be tough to swallow because they've been brought up that way. But I don't see it that way, and I don't talk about it that way. And generally, the rotations with the teams that I have, probably for a long time, even when there is maybe some imbalance from your top players to your bottom players, like I think you've got to share the load. Like if you want to be a really good team, you've got to find a way to develop all of your players, and you've got to share the load, because, when you look at the minutes and people trying to concentrate and play well and do everything in their powers at the speed of the game, in those 6 or 8 minute blocks, whatever it is, clearly if you share the load, then you're going to run home better than the opposition. And then in tournament play, and I know this from experience, if you get it right, you're going to hit finals in better health and nick than everybody else as well. Now, that's challenging in different teams and so forth you have, but I would argue that the only way people develop and get better for the good of the depth of the group is to play. So there's an education piece there and a cultural piece, and maybe just got to reiterating. But yeah, that's sort of not how I do it, but it's certainly something to be aware of. The other way you could do it is just name the 18, and you could leave out some of that information. That makes it hard though, because then you have to have a game brief, because you can't give rotations and you can't give the sort of information. So I think you just got to develop your group so they can handle it, if you think that's a way to go, because clearly, we have a thing called blue line players, which is not my term, came from one of the things I was involved in, where we sometimes have a player that's not in the rotations, and their job is to be ready to plug in if we get an injury, and that way we can basically just shift 2 names around in the rotation line and not have to change the balance of how we're sharing that load.
Yeah.
So if you get that on a Thursday night, you basically might not play.
Yeah. Okay.
So you've got to, I guess it's about your culture and explaining and educating it. Yeah. Everything's a trade-off. Definitely a threat for sure that people have a chance to stew on it or be annoyed or not be mentally ready to play. I think in a good culture though that's trying to compete and be successful, then they've got to learn to get through that, because they've got no chance of playing again the week after if they sulk and don't carry themselves well. So,
massive.
That's what high performing culture is. Being able to deal with those things and do your job basically for the betterment of the team.
Yeah, and I think for me, the one thing it's done is it's kind of given it's one less thing to think about on match day as well. Like, it's one less thing you need to think about. Like, you don't need to think about, am I starting, am I not starting? Like, that stressor's gone. And then people
anxiety,
just,
right?
yeah, like people just know, okay, cool, I'm starting, okay, cool, I'm not. And my other thing is I hate when players sit on the bench for experience. Like, that's just not the way I roll. And for me, I think if you're going to rock up and you're going to put a shot on and you're going to be on my team, you're going to play. And so I think the guys know that if they're playing for me, they're getting minutes. And so there's not that, okay, well, you could be 14 coming into the first team. If you're playing in the first team, you're getting minutes because you're good enough to be there. I'd rather you played full minutes in the twos than play 5 minutes in the ones. Train with the ones week in, week out, like 2 sessions a week, whatever. And then when you're ready to step up and play, you play. And I think that helps the guys knowing that, okay, well, even if I'm not starting, it's not going to affect my minutes. I'm still going to get as many and sometimes even more minutes from starting off the bench anyway. So, yeah, for me, it's just they know.
An art to getting rotations into especially quarters now. How do you break those minutes up so it's not disruptive and so forth? Like, that's an art in itself, which is challenging. And even if you are playing people for small minutes because you want to expose them and sort of tease them into there, but they are playing. Like, the other thing about the Thursday, Friday stuff is they've got 2 days, and if you build your culture where they can either approach you or the leadership group or others, and you're trying to get subgroups to talk about the things that we've been working on and what they're worried about. And so if you can build that, and that's probably a work in progress for me to sort of guide that with this current group, but they do it informally and so forth. Like, they're great with that stuff, but to try and structure it, so here's the information, this is what we've done all week. Okay, you guys need to piece it together, and maybe part of before the game is that they bring up stuff that they're not sure of or that they think we really need to highlight, and then you give that back to them from that Thursday process. So I think there's opportunities with the window of time you give them from the information to the game to really grow the group inside.
Yeah, definitely. And I also break it down into 2 parts. So we train Tuesday, Thursday, selection goes out Tuesday night post-training. So we'll have a chat in the bar afterwards with the staff. Selection will go out who's playing for the ones at the weekend at that point. And then once we've seen them on Thursday and had another chat Friday, starting lineup will go out with a few other game day notes. So then, like I say, it keeps then they understand the timings of things. So the guys that need the consistency get it, and the other guys are a little bit more free flow. Like, okay, cool, turns up whenever. So I think that helps as well. Give that consistency in how stuff's done.
You talked before about routine. People need routine, and they sort of do. It's a really interesting balance, the whole routine thing, because routine can turn us into zombies because we just go through the motions and we work on autopilot. And a bit of chaos and disruption can actually keep people on alert and awake and engaged. It's just getting the balance and how to do it and when to do it so that your whole world's not chaos. But it's also not this regimented routine where we're all sort of sleepwalking through it. That's a really interesting space, I reckon.
I got another question here. In general, what kind of information do you want to give the team at half-time or quarter time? They say coaches, for me for short, struggle to chat for a whole 7 minutes of half-time. How do you manage that time effectively? So,
it's a great question. Quarter time's become an interesting space, and in line with what I spoke about before, we think as coaches we have to have an impact and we have to have input to be doing our job. I think quarter times are a real trap because essentially, even if you're organised and you've got people bringing water on, people get off quickly, you've probably got 90 seconds max, and then you're probably pushing it with that. And you've got to be really careful to start talking and opening up conversations because it can go off and not get finished and just get messy. So, having collaboration and group input is challenging. It can go wrong. I think you've got to have a mechanism where things can be brought up quickly if the group's stressing about something and they need an answer and you haven't seen it and been providing it. So there needs to be an avenue for that. But I don't think asking the group how you're feeling, I think those open-ended sort of question stuff is just messy. And I even think, we have this rule about 3 points, the rule of 3 and so forth. For me, at most it would be 2, and even then I get annoyed with myself because it should be 1 or almost none. And generally the 1 for me is not information. I'm trying to deal with that if I think I have to while the quarter's going on, nudging them and trying to get them to solve it. For me, it's just about how we're feeling. And so that's how I carry myself again, and my tone and my presence and the message, that one message. Generally, if I'm switched on and things are where they need to be in terms of the whole day, it's just, we're going okay, stay composed, the intent's good, we just need to keep persevering and not get frustrated. And you get the sort of feedback and yep, we get it, okay, we're okay, just keep persevering. We've got 3 more quarters, just keep chipping away, nothing needs to change, we just keep doing it. And so the tone there is like, okay, we're okay, be calm. Maybe you need to raise your voice and say, guys, we're not chasing a individual defensive responsibility stuff is not good enough. You know what that means. In particular, this and this. Okay, so you've got to fix that quickly, because that's not that's not going to get the job done. That's it. So it's not high level stuff. It's just part of who you are and your culture and things that you focus on. It's who you are and how you do things, right? But it's tone. How do they need to feel? Okay, we've been tardy. Yeah, there's a little bit of raised voice. Butcher's saying we need to wake up a bit and do it. Or we're going really well. Don't get frustrated, So it's all about tone in line with the sentence. And I don't always get that perfect because I'm human and I'm an idiot sometimes. But that's that's me. It's one line, and it's about how we're feeling and how we maybe need to just adjust how we're carrying ourselves in terms of our intent and our effort. And, half time for me, sometimes subgroup stuff can work, but then the subgroups, do they bring it back together? We're all on the same page. We do that. They're really valuable, but I struggle as whether we're actually getting all the messages together. It takes too long. In a perfect world, you'd have subgroups with some prodding around. I need you to have a chat about this. Then they get their own chats, and then they feed it back to the group, or maybe to the coach and feed it back, but not packaging that and aligning it after that period, I think, is problematic. It's just talking, and it can be divisive. So I've wrestled with that for a long time because it's a great process, but I'm not sure in that time frame you can package it properly.
Yeah, so I've played around with that, and I'm fortunate that the team that I'm in, I've got 2 really, really good assistant coaches. So we'll have 3 subgroups, and we'll head up one each, and we'll have a little chat about 3-4 minutes before half time. Okay, you're going to grab the forwards, you're going to grab the midfield, and I'll grab the defenders or something like that. And okay, can you just poke them on this line, and can you check Dave's okay or whatever? And then when they come in, it's that once they've had their subgroup, well, we give them a minute or 2 just to decompress. So in answer to the question, how do you fill the time? Give them a minute. You don't have to come off the bench and smash them straight away with info. Let them come up, let them take some sweets or a snack or fluid, whatever, decompress, then into their subgroups, and then maybe I'll say 1 or 2 things to cap it off, and then we go again. And I think that's what I found to be most effective. But again, unfortunately, I've got 2 guys who I trust implicitly, whatever, they're there.
Right, that's the solution. It's prompt them to the things that you want them to solve, or to get a feel for whether they're on top of it. And then trying to bring it back together. The only problem with that is you might be missing things, because for me, there are things that you see that sometimes need to be solved, and I'm disappointed if we're not fixing them in the 15 minutes. So that is a chance to have a nav check and a reset, recalibrate, but I'm disappointed when it gets to that. And if it gets to that, for me, I think they just need to be told, because we don't have time to have a workshop over it. So when it gets to that, the collaboration is in real time while the game's happening. That's the skill that I want our team to evolve with, being able to do that in real time. And that's hard, right? And then if it's not right, then I don't think we have time to collaborate like that. I think they just need to be told. But then if you go back to the, getting them to discuss and sort of work through things together, that's different than me knowing there's a problem and going, all right, you've had your chance, you haven't fixed it, this is what it is. That is them actually communicating together what's happening on the field and how they're feeling about stuff, and stuff that they're threatened by or worried about. Now, I might not actually know any of that stuff because I'm not out on the field. It might feel completely different to them. So that's a whole different space of information that you're trying to get out of it. So I think that's a really, really cool thing to do. I guess you've got to decide it's like the needs-based coaching thing. You've got to decide what's required. You know, do they need to be told because they haven't solved it? Is because everything's going really well? Is this a chance for them to just share what they're feeling and for them to own whatever the information is and to come together with it?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I chop and change all the time. I don't have a right answer, and maybe that is my answer. But I think you just got to be wary of the pros and cons. And the biggest mistake for me is allowing lots of conversations that just create more confusion and mess. You're better off just letting them decompress, as you say, which I think is a really important point you made, and just keeping things really clear and clean, which sometimes means only one person is talking.
And I think the other thing is don't be afraid to. So I'll try 2 or 3 different things, just in pre-season. Like we'll mess around with things. We'll get the whiteboards out. We'll maybe have some iPad video. Like we'll mess around with like so many different ways. Just again, it keeps it fresh and interesting as well. Like I say, it's not that kind of zombie mentality of okay, well I'm just going to say this and we'll move through. I think the other thing is don't be afraid, particularly if it's cold, wet, or like. If you can see like they're not really taking on information, don't be afraid to just chuck a ball and let them have a knock around on the field. Like maybe that's what they need. Like they don't want to listen; they just want to go do. So give them a ball, get on the field.
What's the time? What's the purpose of it, right?
Yeah.
The main purpose is to have a break and recharge, and so we don't necessarily need to stuff anything into it except that. Okay, we need to stay warm. Right, maybe we just need to be together, and it's like so we're getting that feeling like it's us, and then we can go back out together. So there's maybe just ways of, emphasising or designing things where they're just regrouping, and it gets back to the same thing around coaches feeling like they have to have input and they have to, sometimes you don't have to do anything, and that goes for quarter time especially. I remember I was coaching a Western Australian under 21 men's team, and we sort of discussed this as like, what do you get out of quarter time? We had lots of conversations around it's a bit of an education piece that I tried to do with them, and them trying to get a real feel for what's valuable with coaching. So we sort of unpack training when coaches talk too much, when you do drills like this, and we try to just get rid of everything that was wasteful or they didn't enjoy, and really use that as a education piece for all of us for doing it better. And we talked about quarter time, that it's just too hard. Like people don't take stuff in, they just need to take a breath. We need to get the right tone and feel so we can go again. Like it's just a moment. And so we started mucking around with this. I can't remember the beat, but it's basically a Navy SEALs or a military breathing technique. I think it was 4-4-4 or 4-2-4, and we would just do it together. We get in a tight huddle, and I go, okay, boys, 4, breathe in, hold, okay, let it out. And it would be sort of almost like a breathing meditation thing for 90 seconds. We didn't talk about anything about hockey. We would just calm ourselves down. And we didn't do it all the time, but we did it when we were going well and it's intense. Like, okay, this is quarter time because it's a break. So let's just let it all out and get ready to go again. We're all here together. We're connected because we're breathing together. We can all feel that rhythm together. All right, we're good, boys. Let's go back to battle. And that was pretty cool.
So I've got last couple of questions. These are on Instagram. So if you were to highlight one thing that you focus on during the game from an actual game point of view, so are you focusing on press? Are you focusing on outlet? Are you focusing on the oppo, on your team, technical aspects? Like, what would you say is like your one key thing that you kind of focus on when you're observing the game and you're in the moment?
I don't think there is one, because I'm looking for whatever we need to at any given time. So there isn't a thing. It is wherever we're at in our timeline of what we're trying to develop, and what either maybe something that's obstructing us or so forth. But I think if you're looking, if I'm trying to picture how I try and see the game as a general starting point, I'm looking at transition. I'm looking at what we're doing when we win the ball back and when we turn the ball over. And I have really clear principles in my mind around how you manage transition both ways. And so there's expectations that around discipline and habits and selflessness that really important to me around how we play, which protect you and also give you better opportunities to have good offense. So that's always front of mind, even if it's just a starting point, to make sure that we're on page with that. And then probably when things get messy, that's probably the first thing I look at as well.
Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, it could be a range of things.
Transition's a good one because that covers so much of the game, and it's actually something which, I think people don't necessarily spend that much time focusing on. So I think transition is something which I think at higher end people really switch on about, whereas I think lower end I think people concentrate on the before and the after, or the offense and defense, but not that bit in the middle, which makes or breaks games.
Well, it's press v outlet, isn't it? And I don't, what are we talking, 20, 30 times each that happens a game, whereas depending on the game, turnovers could be, 80 to 100 each, so and we generally are organised. You need to know what your pressing structure is and how you want to outlet, but I think we make it too regimented. We draw it on the board like it's never like that. You've got to work in concepts and principles and teach the different details around how to make it work. But the game is what happens in between. It's the transitions, it's the moments, because you're not organised and it's never the same. And so having clarity around how you deal with that and what's expected so that you can get it done in that chaos. If you're really good at that, to me, that's the game, because everything flows from either doing that well or not doing it well.
And then last question on here, and this is from a player perspective, so not a coaching perspective. Tips on getting into the right mindset on game day, even if others in your team are not. So if they're more kind of, I guess, jovial, a bit more like free spirit kind of guys, so they're like, they don't seem as if they're right in the right mindset, and you want to get in that groove, like how tips on like helping that.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I think if the environment you're in is disruptive for how you need to prepare, then whether you're comfortable enough talking to the leadership group or the team or the coach, you have to get to a point where that's understood, because that's part of how you harness an environment for all individuals to get what they need with their preparation. And there might be some compromises either way, but you're not going to get that changed unless you're willing to have those conversations and work through it. And hopefully your culture's strong enough to be able to support and deal with that. And then even if it's not perfect for you, there will be compromises, and then you've got to find your own solutions to get what you need. The first one is understanding what you like and what you think you need, and then you've got to find a way to create your own environment for that within the environment of the team. So the challenge of that type of warm-up to support each individual and then to be able to harness all of that into one is challenging from a coaching perspective. But it relies on the players to know what they need and also be aware of what each other needs and try and work that out together, because the coach can't harness it even with a good plan and good knowledge of what it all is unless players have buy-in and they're actually working together and trying to help each other create each other's environments to warm up in. So it's a complicated but interesting piece, but it relies on players as much as it does coaches, I reckon.
Yeah, definitely. Mate, that, we're hour and 5 minutes in, has absolutely flown by. Mate, there's some really good gems in there, and I think there's a lot of stuff in there where I hope it really challenges coaches and players. I really hope that some of the stuff that you brought up kind of challenges coaches on how they do things. Are they just doing it because that's kind of the way it's always been done? And I hate that phrase. Like, that's one of my least favourite phrases, because I think that then sits into laziness. In my opinion, I think if you're like, oh, well, we've always done it this way, that means you haven't got the, I don't know, you haven't got the spuds to go and be your own man and kind of change things a little bit. And I think some things you can't change, but I think there are some things where, why not just be creative and get outside the comfort zone a little bit, and the grass could be greener. Might not be, could be.
Yeah, and I think the bet I probably we don't have time to explain why, but I've been lucky where I've been in environments and then moved into other spaces where I've used that to be not just curious and wanting to find better ways of doing things, but early days forced to try and do that. So you start to try and be quite innovative and creative about what you're doing because you maybe don't have what everyone else has, and that constraint allows you to be really free with that creativity and that innovation. And what I've sort of learnt over the journey is when you unpack everything and don't just assume that that is the best way of doing it, there's lots of things that you can find. And every team individual will have a best model for them, so there's no average, there's no one way. So you got to try and find that for yourself and your group. But I think the key message is that I think you've got to be brave enough and curious enough to look at things really clearly and unpack them, and not just swallow that that's the best way of doing stuff. And if you then figure out, okay, maybe that's not the best way of doing it, then be brave enough to try things, and fail and try and figure it out so you can find a better way.
Yeah, and I don't think there's an age on that either. I think you can be a young coach and challenge the system. I think you can be older and challenge it.
Young coaches challenge the system, get into trouble, mate. That's probably my last tip. But
yeah, that's true. You can push the button though. You can just kind of nudge it a little bit and be, "Are we doing this right?" And I think that's healthy.
Yeah,
mate, we're gonna finish it there. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. I can't wait to catch up with you again. And yeah, stay safe. Good luck this weekend, buddy.
My privilege, mate, and thank you. Look forward to speaking to you soon, mate.
Yeah, definitely.
Cheers.
Take care, buddy. See you later.